My name is Mackenzie Thompson. I'm 29 years old, and last Christmas Eve, I stood on the porch of my mother's house, holding a homemade pie and a pen engraved with her initial. 5 minutes later, my aunt slammed the door in my face, and I realized forgiveness isn't always noble sometimes. It's just another way to let people walk all over you. Pause. Let that sink in. Because this isn't just a story about a ruined Christmas. It's a story about erasure, about being the child that didn't make the photo wall, the name that mysteriously vanishes from holiday invites, and how one woman, me, took that silence and turned it into justice. If you've ever been scapegoated, ghosted by your own blood, or made to feel like you were too sensitive for simply asking to be loved, stick around. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand why revenge isn't always about hatred. Sometimes it's about healing and reclaiming your seat at the table. So go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what was your I'm done moment with family? Let's rewind a bit because no one gets exiled from their own family overnight. I grew up in a cozy little neighborhood in Denver. My dad, Richard, was an infrastructure engineer, sharp-witted, introverted, the kind of man who'd teach you how to fix a leaky sink while quoting poetry. My mom, Karen, was a public school English teacher, warm, organized, church-going from the outside. We were the picture-perfect nuclear family. 2 cars, golden retriever, Christmas cards with matching sweaters. But here's the thing. No one tells you about picture-perfect families. They're often held together with duct tape and denial. The first crack appeared when I was 17. That year, my mom's sister, Aunt Laura, moved back to Denver after her second divorce. She was glamorous, bold, and obsessed with image, the kind of woman who wore pearls to brunch and weaponized compliments. Oh, honey, I love that you don't care about makeup. It's brave. Within months, she and my mom were inseparable. Brunches, yoga, late-night wine chats. And slowly, the temperature in our house began to shift. My mom stopped baking on weekends. She stopped attending my choir recitals. She started sighing when I entered the room. And one night, after what sounded like a whispered argument behind closed doors, she emerged and said words I'll never forget. "Your father and I are separating. I'm moving in with Laura." And just like that, she took my brother Greg and my younger sister Amber and left me with Dad. No discussion, no explanation, just gone. I spent that first Christmas post-divorce in silence. No calls, no card, just the absence of sound where Merry Christmas, sweetheart used to be. But Dad, God bless him, tried. He burned the ham, hung the tree lights backwards, bought me a snow globe with "To My Daughter" in Comic Sans. But what stuck with me wasn't the effort. It was the sentence he said when I asked why Mom didn't call. Sometimes people don't know how to face what they've broken. Years passed. I went to college, became a UX designer, built a life. But every birthday, I still sent a card. Every Easter, a little care package. I kept her number saved, kept sending photos she never replied to. Because somewhere inside me was that annoying, aching belief that she'd come around. And that's where we meet me last December. I had just gotten back from New York, where I'd presented a big product demo. I was riding high, honestly, confident, settled. And then she emailed me. After 6 years of silence. 6 years of, "Sorry, I've been busy." A 6-sentence email. "Kenzie, I've been thinking a lot lately. Maybe it's time we reconnect. Amber and Greg will be home for the holidays. Laura's hosting. We'd love to see you." Mom. I must have read that email 15 times. My hands shook. I cried on the bathroom floor. Then I replied, "I'd love that. I'll bring dessert." I went all out. I baked my grandmother's bourbon pecan pie, the one Mom and I used to make together. I found a vintage pen and had it engraved with an M for Mom, and placed it in the same wooden box she'd given me when I was 10, the one that once held her letters to me. To me, this wasn't just a dinner invite. This was a resurrection, a second chance. And that was my first mistake, believing that some people deserve one. It was the night of Christmas Eve, and I found myself standing in front of Aunt Laura's house, pie in hand, feeling like a character in a holiday movie. The decorations outside glimmered in the twilight, and for a moment, I allowed myself to dream of what might happen, the warm hug from my mom, the laughter shared over pie, maybe even my dad coming along to apologize for the past mistakes. The visions danced before me as I rang the doorbell, a soft breath escaping from my lips, the first sign of nervous excitement in years. But when the door opened, the smile I expected from my mom wasn't there. Instead, Aunt Laura stood at the door with her usual polished grin. "Oh, you're here?" she said. But there was something off in her tone, a little too forced, a little too rehearsed. "I brought your favorite," I said, holding the pie out to her. But her eyes didn't linger on the pie. They were flicking past me, as if she could already see me as an inconvenience, just an object blocking her perfect holiday scene. She stepped back. "Come in, sweetie," she said in that tone she always used when she wanted to sound more nurturing than she actually was. Her voice was thin, betraying her coldness. But I followed her inside. The warmth inside the house hit me the faint scent of cinnamon, of turkey baking in the oven. It smelled like Christmas. It should have felt like home. But instead, it felt like a foreign place I wasn't meant to be in. My mom was nowhere to be seen. I looked around, but it was Greg and Amber sitting by the fireplace, sipping on wine and chatting with strangers I didn't recognize. My heart dropped into my stomach. No sign of Mom. Aunt Laura led me to the living room, where I set the pie down on the coffee table. I could see the pity in her eyes. But it wasn't for me. It was the same look she always gave when she wanted to remind me that I wasn't part of the family anymore. She patted the seat beside her, but the gesture felt empty, like a queen offering her throne with no intention of allowing anyone to sit. "Where's Mom?" I asked, my voice quiet, but carrying the weight of the years we hadn't spoken. She paused, her smile fading. "She's upstairs. She'll be down soon. Let's have a drink first." "Okay." I nodded, but my heart was racing. The words were there, choking me. Why had it taken so long? Why had she left without even telling me? But I kept them inside, forcing a calm facade. "Sure," I said. We made small talk as I forced myself to sit through awkward silence. The fire crackling in the background, but my mind was racing. I couldn't help but notice the subtle exchanges between Aunt Laura and Greg. Their eyes darting toward me, their whispered tones floating around the room. No one had even tried to make me feel like I belonged. No one even said happy holidays. The door at the top of the stairs creaked open, and my mom finally appeared. But she didn't look like the woman I remembered. The woman who used to tuck me in, sing lullabies in the middle of the night. No, this woman was distant. The air around her seemed colder than the winter outside. She was dressed in her usual expensive sweater, but even that felt more like armor than warmth. "Mackenzie," she said, her voice cool. It wasn't the voice I'd waited for. I forced a smile, fighting the tightness in my chest. "Hi, Mom?" She didn't meet my eyes at first. Her gaze flicked toward the pie, then back at me. "I see you brought dessert," she said, her tone neutral. "Thank you." I wanted to say so many things. Ask why she didn't come to visit, why she let years go by. But instead, I forced the words I knew would not get a response. "I thought we could make this a special night, like we used to. You, me, the whole family. It's been so long." Her smile was tight. "We're glad to have you here. Mackenzie, really, we are." But it didn't feel like it. It didn't feel like I was a part of this family at all. It felt like I was an uninvited guest, tolerated only because it was Christmas. The moment stretched into eternity. The silence between us grew heavier, suffocating. Every word felt out of place. Then it happened. Aunt Laura's smile faltered, and she leaned toward me, speaking in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Actually, Mackenzie," she said, her tone almost too sweet. "Your mom and I were talking earlier, and, well, I think it's better if you don't stay for dinner." My heart stopped. The words hit me harder than anything I could have imagined. I froze. For a moment, the room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. The quiet murmurs of the guests around the fire, the clinking of glasses, all vanished. What I choked out, my voice shaking. "I'm sorry," Aunt Laura continued, not even a hint of regret in her voice. "But we've already planned the seating arrangements. And, well, there's just not enough room for you. You understand, don't you?" I felt the blood drain from my face. Mom. Standing there like a stranger. Didn't say a word, not even a glance. The woman who had given me life was now silently supporting this cruelty. I felt the sting of rejection cut deeper than anything physical. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She had taken everything I had given and thrown it back in my face. My throat was dry. I stood up too quickly, the chair scraping against the floor. I brought the pie," I stammered, my chest tightening. I thought this was about family. But Aunt Laura cut me off with a laugh that was too harsh to be real. "We have plenty of food. Mackenzie, don't worry about it. You're always welcome to visit. Just not tonight." And then my mom, my mother, who had been silent until now, looked at me and said the words that would change everything. "We'll talk later. But for tonight, it's best you leave." I stood there, pie forgotten, my mind reeling. Every rejection, every little cruelty, suddenly came crashing into me like a tidal wave. I wanted to scream, I wanted to shout, but I couldn't. I couldn't even cry. The words, the hurt, the years of longing, it all crystallized in that one moment. I turned and walked to the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. The chill of the night air hit me as the door swung open. My fingers were numb as I placed the pie down on the steps outside. I stood there, feeling like a stranger in my own life, my heart torn into pieces. As I walked away, the door clicked shut behind me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. But that moment, the slammed door, the coldness, it shattered something inside me. And in its place, a fire started to burn. A fire that would never go out until I had my answers, until I had the justice I deserved. The night air was colder than I expected, biting at my skin as I walked away from Aunt Laura's house. The world felt like it was slipping out of my grasp. The bitter reality of my family's rejection sinking deep into my chest. Each step felt like a betrayal, my own feet pulling me further away from the woman I once called Mom. The family that had forgotten me. The smell of cinnamon and roasting turkey was still faintly drifting out of the door, a cruel reminder of the warmth I would never have. My mind raced as I walked through the streets, aimlessly at first, trying to outrun the ache in my chest, trying to make sense of everything. Was this really happening? Was I really this invisible to them? I reached the park down the street, a place I used to go when I needed to think, when I needed to escape from the noise of life. The swings swayed in the cold breeze, and I sat on one, my feet barely grazing the ground. I didn't know how long I'd been there, but when the tears came, they were silent, falling in heavy drops, no longer holding back. The anger, the sadness, and the feeling of being discarded all came crashing down, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel it. I hated them. I hated them for what they'd done, for what they'd made me. But more than that, I hated that I had let them do it. I hated that I had allowed them to make me feel small for so long, to tell me I didn't matter, to erase me from their lives like I was nothing. It wasn't just the rejection. It wasn't just Aunt Laura's cutting words. It was the years of silence, the years of standing in the background, watching as they built their perfect little world without me. And my mother, the woman who had once been my everything, had turned her back on me without a second thought. I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve, swallowing down the lump in my throat. It ends now. No more. They had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and as much as I hated to admit it, I knew deep down that it wasn't just about revenge. It was about me reclaiming my life, my voice, my right to exist as more than a shadow in their world. I stood up, the cold air hitting my face with sharp clarity. The decision had been made. There was no going back now. I had spent so many years trying to be the good daughter, the one they would love and accept. But I had nothing to show for it. They weren't going to change, and I couldn't keep waiting for them to come around. The following weeks were a blur of calculated planning, quiet fury simmering inside me as I worked behind the scenes, gathering evidence, learning the ins and outs of my family's financial dealings, and uncovering the lies they had built their lives upon. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to throw it all away and just walk away. But then I thought of the look on Aunt Laura's face, the cold indifference in my mother's eyes, and it was all the motivation I needed. I started small. I found my father's financial records, the ones he had carefully hidden. Money funneled through companies with strange names, accounts set up under my name, siphoning money in ways that didn't make sense. It didn't take long for me to realize what had been happening. They had been using me, my identity, my reputation for years, building an empire on the back of my silence. And now, the truth would come to light. There were moments when I thought about what would happen when it all came crashing down. Would they be shocked? Would they care? Would they even acknowledge the damage they had caused? The more I found, the more the rage inside me grew, and with it, a strange sense of clarity. This was the only way I could make them see me, truly see me. For the first time in my life, it was my sister, Sophie, who pushed me to the edge. I had never been close to Sophie, not the way other sisters were. We were from two different worlds. While I was trying to earn my place in a family that never wanted me, Sophie was always the golden child, the one they praised, the one they never had to question. And now, she was starting to show signs of being just as entrenched in their lies as they were. One evening, as I was preparing to confront my father, I received a message from Sophie. It was brief, but the words cut through me like a knife. "I know what you're planning, Mackenzie, and you're going to ruin everything." I stared at the message for a long time. A wave of confusion, followed by frustration, hit me. Was she really going to defend them? After everything. I dialed her number, my heart pounding. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Sophie," I said, my voice calm but carrying an edge. "I need to know why you're doing this, why you're still protecting them." There was a long pause before she spoke, her voice cold. "You don't get it. Do you? Everything we have is because of Dad. You can't just throw all of that away because of some petty grudge." I felt my stomach churn as I tried to hold back the bitterness that was rising in my chest. A petty grudge. You think I'm holding on to a grudge? What about the fact that he used my name to build his empire? What about the years he made me feel like nothing? Another silence stretched between us. Then, her words hit me harder than anything she had ever said before. "You're always the outsider. Mackenzie, always. You were never meant to be part of this family." The words struck deep, deeper than I cared to admit. It was everything I had feared for so long, everything I had tried to prove wrong. But there it was, in her voice, the truth I had been running from. Sophie had never seen me as anything other than a burden, an outsider. My heart hardened. "Then you'll get what you want," I said, my voice low but unwavering. "I'll leave, but I'll make sure you never forget why." The line went dead, and I stood there for a moment, staring at my phone. A part of me wanted to scream, wanted to collapse, but I knew that doing so would only give them more of what they wanted, more weakness, more silence. I was done with silence. I didn't sleep much that night. The weight of what I was about to do kept me awake. Turning in bed, staring at the ceiling as thoughts raced through my mind, everything was coming to a head. Everything I had been planning for the past few weeks. The hours I had spent combing through my father's financial documents, the quiet phone calls, the hushed meetings with the people who had been helping me. It all led to this moment, a moment when I would finally expose everything. My family's lies, their manipulation, their disregard for me. All of it would be on display for the world to see. I sat up and swung my legs over the side of the bed, rubbing my face with both hands. My heart thudded in my chest. Was I ready? Was anyone ever truly ready to destroy their family like this? To break it all open? To expose the darkest secrets that they had so carefully kept hidden for years? I stood up and walked to the small desk in my room, where the evidence lay neatly arranged bank statements, email chains, secret contracts, and my father's personal letters that contained enough incriminating evidence to bring down a dynasty. This is it, Mackenzie. I thought to myself, you've worked too hard, too long, to turn back now. But the silence that had surrounded me all my life kept creeping in, pulling at me, whispering doubts. What if they don't believe me? What if they come after you? The questions lingered in the air like smoke, threatening to choke me. But I pushed them aside. No more doubt, no more silence. The next morning, the day of reckoning, I dressed in black, an outward expression of my resolve. It wasn't just for show. It was a reminder to myself of what I was about to do and why I had to do it. This wasn't about vengeance. Not entirely. It was about justice. It was about finally taking control of my own story. I left my apartment in the early hours, before anyone had the chance to reach me, before anyone could try to stop me. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. The only people who knew the truth were the ones I had carefully chosen to help me, Angela. A lawyer who had worked tirelessly to gather the evidence I needed, and Ben, an old friend from the military who had connections to the media and government. They would be with me every step of the way. I arrived at the conference room where I had arranged to meet the media representatives, journalists, reporters, photographers, all ready for the bombshell I was about to drop. The room was stark, cold, with a long, shiny table in the center and a wall of glass windows looking out over the city skyline. It felt like a war room. And in a way, it was. I took a deep breath and set the folder containing all the evidence in front of me. The room was buzzing with quiet chatter as the journalists began to filter in. I could see their eyes darting around, sizing me up. I was just one woman, sitting at a table filled with powerful media figures. But I wasn't just any woman. And today, they were going to find out why. Angela entered shortly after, her expression tight with focus. She gave me a brief nod, and I knew it was time. She had been the mastermind behind pulling this all together, ensuring that every detail was in place. She had handled the legal side, making sure I was covered, ensuring that this would be bulletproof. I couldn't have done it without her. "You're sure about this?" she asked quietly, as she pulled a chair next to mine. Her voice was calm, but there was a certain steel beneath it. She had been my rock through all this, her unwavering support allowing me to stand strong. "I have to do this, Angela," I said, my voice firm. "It's the only way." Angela didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at the folder in front of me, the one with all the proof my father's deceit, the money he had laundered using my identity. The contracts, the falsified documents. The magnitude of it all still seemed overwhelming, even after everything I had uncovered. But there was no turning back. A few minutes later, the door opened, and one by one, the journalists filed in, their eyes scanning the room, searching for the story. They didn't know it yet, but today they were going to witness a scandal that would rock my family to its core. The tension in the room was palpable. The air crackled with anticipation. I waited for them to settle into their seats before I began. "Thank you for being here today," I said, my voice strong and unwavering. "I know you've all heard rumors about my family, rumors about their wealth, their influence, their business dealings, but what I'm about to tell you is not a rumor. This is the truth." I paused for a moment, letting the weight of my words settle in. The room fell silent. Every eye on me, every ear hanging on my every word. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. "My name is Mackenzie Morgan," I continued, "and I've been living a lie. For years. I've been kept in the shadows of a family who used me, who built their fortune on my back, without my knowledge, without my consent." I took a deep breath, letting the gravity of what I was saying sink in. This wasn't just about the financial misconduct. It wasn't just about the lies. It was about the betrayal of a family who should have protected me, who should have stood by me, but instead had used me for their gain. I have evidence, I said, my voice sharp now. I have proof that my father, Robert Morgan, has been using my name and my identity to funnel money into illegal accounts, to create shell companies, to hide the truth from the world, and he's done it all with the help of my sister, Sophie, and my mother, who turned a blind eye to everything that was happening right under their noses. The room erupted into murmurs as I pulled the folder in front of me and began to lay out the documents, the bank statements, the contracts, the emails, all the evidence that would expose everything. I could see the reporters' eyes widen as they scanned the pages. They were seeing the story unfold before them. The scandal of the century. The downfall of one of the most powerful families in the country. But as I spoke, as I laid bare the truth, there was one thing that kept gnawing at me. Sophie, my sister, the person who had once been my closest ally, who had once stood by my side. She was the one who had rejected me the hardest. She was the one who had sided with our father. And now, as the truth began to unfold, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had known all along, that she had been part of this. Whether she had realized it or not, as I looked around the room, I could feel the weight of my father's gaze from afar. I knew he would be watching this, waiting for his turn to defend himself. But he wouldn't get the chance. Not today. I finished laying out the evidence, feeling the weight of it settle in the room. It was done. There was no going back. And then I waited. The room remained silent for a long moment after I finished speaking. The reporters were still digesting the weight of what I had just dropped into their laps. The air felt heavy, as if the building itself had drawn a collective breath, holding its gaze on the future. The scandal was unfolding before their eyes, an empire built on deceit, a family torn apart by greed. And yet, none of them dared to speak. It was as if the room itself was afraid of what would come next. I leaned back in my chair, not because I was tired, but because I had to. The physical weight of the moment pressed down on me. My hands were shaking, but I kept them folded in my lap. My mind was still processing what I had just done. I had exposed my father for what he truly was. And with it, I had exposed the pain and betrayal I had carried for so many years. There was no going back now. But then, the quiet was broken. A voice familiar and smooth spoke from the back of the room. "Mackenzie," he said, "what you've said today is a bold claim, but it's nothing more than hearsay without evidence. I'm sure the public would like to hear from me. Wouldn't they?" I froze. The voice belonged to Robert Morgan. My father. It was impossible to ignore the venom dripping from his words. The cold certainty that he would make this disappear, that he would turn the story in his favor. My breath caught in my throat as the door to the conference room opened, and there he stood, flanked by two of his top lawyers. His eyes scanned the room before settling on me, and for a split second, it felt like we were back in the old house, the one we had all shared before everything started to fall apart. The house where he had sat at the head of the table, the golden patriarch, giving orders and expecting obedience. I had been so desperate for his approval then. Now, I was desperate for him to face the consequences of his actions. But I refused to flinch. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Not this time. He stepped forward, his shoes clicking on the floor, with a rhythm that seemed far too measured for the chaos that was about to unfold. "I'm sure you all understand that Mackenzie's accusations are exaggerated, if not outright false," he said, the calm in his voice almost suffocating. "She has always had a tendency to exaggerate things, but I assure you, everything I've done has been for the good of this family. The things she's accusing me of, they're trivial misunderstandings, nothing more." I wanted to shout, to stand up and accuse him of everything. But I knew that my words alone wouldn't be enough. They needed more. They needed the truth, the hard evidence. Angela glanced at me, her eyes signaling that it was time. I nodded, and with a simple motion, I slid the final document across the table, a piece of paper that would change everything. I watched as Robert's eyes locked onto the document. He didn't take it right away, but he didn't need to. He knew what it was. His gaze faltered for a second, just enough for me to notice, just enough for the room to realize that there was something in my hand that had the power to unravel everything he had worked so hard to hide. He reached forward slowly, as if he were still in control of the situation, as if this was still his show to direct. He took the paper from the table, scanning it with a furrowed brow, and then, just like that, his facade cracked. His eyes widened for a split second before he quickly masked it with a tight smile. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "From your private accounts," I replied, my voice steady. "The ones you thought no one would ever find." The room was holding its breath now, all eyes on Robert as he began to pace. His lawyers exchanged nervous glances. They knew it was over. He knew it was over, but neither of them had the courage to admit it. Not yet. They had always prided themselves on their ability to manipulate situations, to twist the truth and control narratives. But this time, the narrative was no longer theirs to control. Robert stopped pacing and turned to me, his expression hardening into something colder than I had ever seen. "You think you've won? You think that showing these little papers to these people will do anything? This is nothing. This is just a moment of weakness on your part." "Mackenzie, a last-ditch effort to try and destroy everything we've worked for." His words were dripping with venom, but I wasn't intimidated. I had spent my entire life learning how to keep my head down, how to stay invisible, how to blend into the background, but not anymore, today. I was going to make him see the truth. I was going to make everyone see it. The journalists were looking at each other now, whispering among themselves. They were starting to put the pieces together. They were starting to understand that this wasn't a simple family dispute. This was a scandal that reached into the highest echelons of power. This was about more than just money. It was about control. And Robert Morgan had been using his power to destroy anyone who got in his way, including me. But there was one more thing, something that Robert hadn't accounted for. I had Sophie's confession, the one I had held on to for weeks, knowing that it would come in handy when the time was right. And now, the time was right. "Sophie," I said, my voice cutting through the tension in the room, "you might want to hear this." There was a shift in the room as Sophie's name hung in the air. Her face, which had been impassive up until now, suddenly tightened. She turned to me, her lips pressing together in a thin line. "You're not going to bring her into this," Robert snapped. But I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew exactly what I was about to do. He knew what his daughter had done. "I think it's time everyone hears the truth." I said. I turned to the reporters, then back to Robert. "You're not the only one with secrets. Father, Sophie knows exactly what happened, and she's been helping you cover it up." Sophie stood frozen for a moment, her gaze flickering between me and our father. The room had gone completely still, the anticipation so thick that it felt like it could be cut with a knife. "Go ahead, Sophie," I said softly. Tell them what you know." The weight of the moment pressed down on her. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, guilt flashing in them. And then, like a dam finally breaking, she spoke. "I didn't want to be part of this," Sophie said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I couldn't get out. I couldn't leave. I was scared. I was afraid of what he would do." She paused, her gaze shifting to Robert. "I never signed off on it, but I knew. I knew everything, and I didn't stop it." The room was silent, the shock rippling through every person in the room. Sophie's confession was the final nail in Robert's coffin. His empire of lies had been exposed, piece by piece. Robert stood motionless, his eyes locked onto his daughter, a look of betrayal in his gaze. The man who had once controlled everything, his family, his wealth, his legacy, was now powerless, stripped bare by the very people he had tried to control. "You're done." "Robert," I said, the words slipping out with a finality I hadn't expected. "This is over."